So, on Monday, April 20th, I sat down with the honey badgers in Calgary, Alberta to discuss the incident that has come to be known as Expogate. This was shot on a cell phone, so it took some time to clean up the audio to the point where it was actually audible, and it unfortunately cut Sage Gerard off mid-sentence at the end. But I think it's still worth watching because where else are you going to see all these awesome people from all over Canada, the US, and the UK all in the same room? Nowhere. Hey, I'm Nick Reddick with MensRightsEdmonton.com. I'm here with the Honey Badger Brigade in the wake of Expogate. Now, what happened at Expogate was the Honey Badgers and, Calgary Expo, the Honey Badgers and Allison were removed from the site in the wake of a very civil disagreement over feminism and pop culture. I mean, I didn't know any of this was going to happen when I planned to come out here, but here I am now, and I'm meeting Rachel Edwards, Sage Gerard, Dr. Randwerkamp, Hannah Wallen, Anna Cherry, and Brian Martinez from the Honey Badgers. And anybody have any thoughts on what happened? Any reflections that they want
to? The long and short of it is that Allison Tiemann did nothing wrong, but she was treated like a monster.
Yeah, and there's really no excuse for why she was kicked out the way she was. They really should have. But they really should have tried to find a way to, at least find out what she was doing or question her or something. Gone through the normal steps that you normally do when you had a complaint, and that just didn't happen, unfortunately.
The policy of the convention says that they have a zero tolerance. They take zero tolerance for harassment, and they would investigate any report of harassment, no matter how small it was, according to the language of their policies. But they also say that they would investigate, right? They did not investigate. They were operated on hearsay based on tweets. 25 tweets for reporting harassment after Allison spoke up in a panel well within the parameters established by the panelist and the moderator.
Well, if I were to interject, from what I understand, there was 25 complaints, not specifically through social media, and from what we understand, they were from the congoers themselves, so just to dispel some rumors that perhaps were floating around about this being a complete runaway media,
Well, that's what security said. Security said social media.
What security, the actual words that security used, they said 25 complaints, including social media.
Okay.
And so they got complaints from various angles, and 25 of them came from social media, but there were complaints from other areas as well.
Mm.
But it's the thing that strikes me as odd is it seems that most of these complaints were not received until after an article was written about us in the city. Yeah. So that really strikes me as it's interesting that they didn't just get up and go complain the day that the panel occurred.
But what was really disturbing about all of this is that, again, security did not even offer an oral warning, did not offer any sort of buffer to the final decision to ban Allison and the Honey Badger Brigade from every similar event across Canada. Now, the only two things that people were complaining about were, one, the participation in the panel discussion. A full recording of this panel discussion is available online, shows that there was no harassment taking place whatsoever. And again, Allison and myself, we were the only two Honey Badgers in attendance. We were operating well within the boundaries set by the moderator. The other thing they could get offended about was a Gamergate banner, content on the booth itself, which again, to those passing by, there was nothing there that was outlandishly offensive. The people who saw the banner and got offended by it were people who had a political leaning against Gamergate to begin with, and a pro-Gamergate position, and they allowed their own emotions to, in essence, control their interpretation of the situation and to say to the staff, these people are not allowed to be here. And these political motivations are what drove this banishment, even though security reported that there were no political reasons behind the banning at all. But all the behaviors by the Expo staff just points to the contrary. This was very much political, and it was very poorly handled.
First, I should say give sort of a timeline of events is a thing that might be important.
Well, that's, Hannah, the conversation you overheard.
Yeah, the whole thing really started out that, like, we were only there for a little bit, on the first day. We had already set up and everything. When, I overheard a conversation where one of the workers at the customer service table said, we need to start shutting some booths down. And I look up and he's talking to a couple of ladies, and, one of them said, yeah, like that one over there, and motioned towards us. And we didn't want to get paranoid over that, you know. I talked to the rest of the group about it, and we thought maybe it could have been a joke. Maybe they could have been talking about the booth next to us that wasn't filled in yet. We didn't want to immediately get suspicious, so we went over to get some clarification. And we went over to talk to the guy, and he said that the conversation hadn't happened, and he hadn't been involved in it. So it was, which is kind of, now that I think about it, that didn't happen, and I wasn't involved in it. This is kind of a, yeah, you can't have both. Either it didn't happen or you weren't involved in it. If you can't be involved in something that didn't happen.
So we need to clarify that.
Yeah, but that is basically what I was told. It didn't happen, and he wasn't involved in it. So that's where I think it really started. That's where the consideration was, you know, of closing down the booth was first expressed. And then of course there was the panel, because we really didn't do anything else that day. We just set up the booth and we talked to people, and there was nothing unusual that happened.
Our booth was right across from the customer service and the exhibitor aid. So there were Expo employees who were sitting right across from us, and everything was wonderful and civil, and no complaints or lodged of any kind.
They had plenty of time to come over and talk to us. If somebody had a complaint, they would have had plenty of time to come over and talk to us. Those two girls were the only people we ever saw motion towards our booth from over there, so it was quite obvious that nobody was over there complaining about us, because they would have turned around and looked at us.
2 to 8 p.m. I believe.
Yeah. So there was no sign that there was anything wrong that day.
In fact, we were all in high spirits and felt like the expo was quite, handling everything professionally. And in fact, I was wearing a honey badger outfit that didn't have, you know, the longest skirt in the world. And being right across the way, like 10 feet from people who ran the con, I got nothing but smiles and pleasant interactions from the ladies that ran it. So I personally felt, and I know others felt great about it Thursday.
And that's an important point, because during the panel, when Allison and I were sitting there, we got the impression that the conversation was going off without a hitch. No real disruptions, no real belligerence, nothing gave us the impression that this was anything other than a civil event. But it was only when we got in the next day,
Friday morning.
right, then people, are you sure it was a Thursday or Friday? My time memory is mixed up on this one.
Thursday, I think, was the first day.
Yes.
Friday's the second day.
Okay, right.
It's been a heck of a weekend, so.
All right, yeah, because I remembered it as Thursday before, but I probably got that wrong. So, but the issue was here that between when security kicked us out and the panel, we got wind of the Mary Sue piece, and then the social media response. We found tweets where people put a picture up of the Gamergate poster. Somebody said, this is really fucked up, and people were commenting in the Twitter feed saying, I want to punch a house down, I like to judo chop some fools, or some stuff like that. And we took a PDF screenshot of that, and we wanted to keep that on. And you know, some of us were worried that, is somebody about to mess with our booth, right? So that's when we got a recorder going, and we went into the convention, and we're just like, we need to be ready for the worst here. We might have some property damage or things of that nature.
And by that time, they were already bragging on Twitter about having shut us down.
Yeah.
And then we came in there, right, and the booth looked okay, but then security came in and went over to Allison, and in essence would not state any reason for why she was being removed, so long as the recorder was running, and they wanted to speak to her in isolation away from the rest of us.
Yeah. They were going to take her away in isolation until she said to her husband, and then, of course, they let her husband go with her.
And I thought, of course, they would let her record, so.
Yeah, no, she wasn't allowed to take a recorder.
What we heard, what was presented, that she would be kicked out without any explanation whatsoever if the recorder was present.
Right.
However, if the recorder was removed, then she would actually be given a reason.
Right.
Yeah, and I had seen the
Which is
stuff
unreal.
taking place online, and I was like frantically trying to get a hold of Allison and Sage to be like, guys, some shit is going down on social media. You guys need to watch out. By then, you guys have already found it.
And what was really disturbing about the aftermath, I mean, of course, there was the media blow up, but when the Calgary Expo staff were put on that position where they fucked up, they did not actually state a reason for the removal, but rather they tried to rationalize the removal by making excuses, digging into each of our individual histories to say, oh, here's why you were removed, and they would come up with increasingly ridiculous reasons that are easily disprovable each and every time, but would of course validate the feelings of the people who thought it would be a good idea to remove Leslie.
Yeah, and actually, they're digging into your history. That kind of hints at
I'm not even relevant. I'm not even frickin' relevant to that whole thing.
No, but it very, very much hints at a pattern of behavior, pretty much an international pattern of behavior among feminists. Because the things that they dug up in Sage's history were feminists using false accusations to silence a political opponent. And they were going to use the news stories, or not the news stories, but the accusations themselves from back then as evidence that we're dangerous to support the false accusations that they are using now to silence their opponents.
To support false accusations.
Yeah,
It's a woozle effect.
right, and the act of digging those up and presenting them as if they were not already debunked is also using a false accusation to silence your opponents. So here we have in the U.S., we have it in Canada, that's international. We have an international pattern of behavior. I would encourage people who examine and criticize feminism to start looking for other examples of that same behavior. And to, when you see feminists making accusations in the face of an argument, take a look and see if there's any merit to those accusations before you even consider them. I mean, before you even consider the person dangerous or start criticizing the person that's being accused. Take a look and see if the accusations have any real merit. Because it seems to me that that's how feminists argue. And instead of, point A, point B, and point C, and so on, it's point A, well, you're a bad person.
Yeah.
And I can prove it because you're harassing me by making your point. And that's all we get.
And I think something is really wrong with the world if you have to be in a position where you have to ask people to investigate. If you're in a position where if somebody were to make an accusation, especially a very inflammatory one, such as you're harassing women, or even in my case and in my history, you're about to kill women, you're about to go out and destroy the world. It's this unbelievable inflammatory stuff, even after it's been debunked, whether it be in my case or in the other case, they still keep bringing it up, and no one seems to have the abstract thinking necessary, at least no one who really needs to see this has the abstract thinking necessary to see that accusations of harassment can itself be a form of harassment, that accusations are weapons.
And while we're talking about all this, I got something to say about the accusations against Allison for damseling.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to bitch slap someone and then complain that because they're upset that they're whining. And you don't get to kick someone's career down. You don't get to damage someone's career and then call them a damsel for having feelings about it.
In the meantime, the so-called victims of Gamergate feel completely all right with putting up GoFundMes and other fundraisers for their living expenses. And that is not considered whining or damseling.
Exactly.
When someone can turn around and say, I was afraid for my life over someone saying, you didn't do a good job with this video, and you suck, big deal. I don't care about that. They didn't just knock down 7 years of your life. They didn't knock down work that you actually had gathered a large group of people around you.
They didn't
to
actually
contribute to.
blacklist you. They did not refund your booth costs.
Yeah.
Right.
And if anything has ever kept women out of anything in geek culture, it's not people saying, I don't like you. It's not people saying, I don't approve of what you're doing. It's not people criticizing you. It's people saying, you can't be there. You're kicked out.
You don't
And
belong.
the only people who have ever done that is feminists.
Right.
Feminists are responsible for that.
Feminists go around telling people that they don't belong in communities.
Yeah.
Allison brought a positive contribution to the community. She brought an interpretation that would make expos better,
Yeah.
She brought something that would make comic books better, even according to the standards that were set by the panelists in the discussion. We want more realistic depictions of human beings.
It was a classical second wave feminist argument that Allison was bringing up.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's have equal
Pro
compassion.
women.
Let's have equal compassion for men who are hurting, and let's not use victim narratives to define womanhood entirely. And the response was to treat her in such a way that she was bullied. She was bullied. And to carry on your points, because you all really hit the nail on the head here. During the panel, the panelists, when they were told to cite their experiences as women in comics, they would come up with things like, I got a Batman comic and the guy at the counter asked if I was getting it for my boyfriend. Like, this was the peak of how bad it was for them, right? And they would talk about having conversations of this nature that could just very well be explained away as examples of social awkwardness on the part of a guy at worst, if you would even blame the guy at all. But even so, the presumption of male malice went throughout the entire panel. All comic books are written by men, and blah 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 blah. And that again was they didn't have any experiences like the one Allison just went through. Allison lost money. Allison lost a booth. Allison,
faith and reputation.
right? Allison was treated like garbage by people who said that they were wanting to support people like her.
In her hometown, no less. Her hometown, the place she grew up, that town treated her this way.
Well, some people in
That
area.
And some people in town, not the whole town, but, you know, we had media outlets. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, you grow up reading certain publications and stuff, and then to find that those publications are perhaps saying ill things about you.
Based on another article by a very partisan publication, which
The Expo is publicly funded, isn't it?
Yes,
partially
It's
So,
funded.
to some degree.
it's partially public funded.
We've heard people connected to the convention saying that Alberta money was tied into this.
Yes. And that's the thing that's so,
The city enabled this level of bullying,
And
and
here's-
they might be upset about that.
and here's the thing, this was supposed to be my first convention. I was really excited because I was getting to be an exhibitor the first time around, and that was so exciting. I was really interested in doing all the things you usually do at a convention, you know, like, you know, going off to the booths and things like that, go to the dealer's room. I didn't go to the dealer's room on the first day because I thought, you know, I'm gonna have 3 more days.
So we had to set up.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna have 3 more days in time to do all this. And so, but I did, you know, go around and talk to artists, and I was very cordial. I wasn't talking about men's rights or anything, but I did talk about things like, you know, my interests, like, you know, Doctor Who, cartoons that I like, anime. And, you know, I didn't bring my politics into it because I was afraid that, you know, we might face kind of a backlash. So it's just completely ludicrous. I could understand if we had done something wrong, but we were on our best behavior.
And speaking of not wanting to bring your politics, just being afraid of it to experience the backlash, you know, I just gotta say, the other exhibitors were really nice. Here we were, we had just basically gotten a red letter slapped on our chest, you know, we're getting thrown out. You don't usually get thrown out for nothing at places like this, you know, and they're looking at us. Not one of them was in any way, they didn't take sides, they didn't start criticizing us, you know. They didn't throw rocks at us. They were very sympathetic and very neutral and very nice. And there was no animosity at all. And none of them had come and complained to us about our booth either. So I'm really pleased with the way we were treated by the other exhibitors.
And this is exactly why we took the position that we would not want to have any sort of blanket anger response, where people were to say, boycott the entire expo. No, don't do that, because the exhibitors were not at fault. The exhibitors were not the people who made the decision from their ivory tower, in essence, to throw Allison out. The people who were there at the expo were there to support their own livelihoods in the same way that Allison was, and for that reason, I think, and the fact they were, you know, they were doing their own thing, minding their own business, but they were willing to listen to Allison, which is a hell of a lot more than what could be said for the expo staff, who really weren't interested in listening to her at all. And in fact, one of the most frustrating things about the conversation with security was that I mentioned earlier we took that PDF screenshot of tweets that were talking about doing judo chops and honey badgers and things like that. And I showed this to the security officer, at least the guy that was reporting that Allison was getting kicked out, and he didn't answer. He didn't really do anything with that information whatsoever. Didn't even go onto his radio to say, hey, look, I mean, this we might need to reevaluate and do a little bit more digging here.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, security was there to do a job, and for that reason, we can't say that security had one way or any sort of political position in this. But the security was told unequivocally, get Allison out of there, get the honey badgers out of there, and he was there to carry out those orders.
And indeed, it was the honey badgers, which, well, Allison is the one banned and basically blacklisted nationwide by this particular company. All of us had exhibitor badges, and that was our way to enjoy the convention for all 4 days, and having the badges taken, we had no other opportunity to enjoy the con as just guests, which many of us are, well, all of us are quite genuine nerds, and we're quite looking forward to doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really disheartening when they asked me to give them my badge. I was like, and I told them, I said,
And the
thanks.
tickets are sold out, so we could.
Yeah, I mean, I told them, I said, you know, thanks for censoring me. This is really great. And it was, you know, I was really upset.
And of course, censor is not a euphemism here. I know some people were thinking this is a private company and they could do what they wish. Well, not really. If they're in the position where they're breaking their own policies and how they handle investigations, and public money's tied into this, they have additional obligations that they just did not fulfill.
Well, and here's where the difference between free speech violation and censorship kicks in anyway. Even if they are a private company, and even if they have their rights, even if all of that were true, it would still be censorship. It does not have to be illegal to be censorship. Censorship is simply when you prevent something from being said that a person is trying to say or an entity is trying to express. That is censorship. It doesn't matter whether you are keeping the cuss words out of a kid's cartoon or whether you are preventing people from
Or depictions of anti-censorship.
And it
Or
does
depictions
not,
of Vivian.
right, and it does not matter that there is some censorship, like keeping the cuss words out of the kids' cartoons, that is legitimate and reasonable. It doesn't make all censorship not censorship. It doesn't make all censorship reasonable, and it doesn't make it okay to censor political views that you disagree with because they make you uncomfortable.
Yeah. I heard they were selling, and this might be just a rumor, that they were selling Nazi paraphernalia at the con, but we were somehow too extreme to stay.
That and the same expo had The Walking Dead and a cosplayer dressed up as a two-headed black man in chains under a white man. So that's on the Twitter feed, and it's on, the thing here that I gotta understand here is the double standard is just glaring.
Yeah.
Glaringly obvious, and the amount of squirming that the Calgary Expo staff and their media division is doing to try to rationalize and make themselves look sane. I mean, it's obvious that they're flip-flopping. You're watching them writhe, trying to figure out a way to paint this as where they're the good guys, and they're failing badly. And then they started blocking people who are like, you're full of shit.
The artist who drew the Gamergate banner with the friendly little badgers, Panina, was blocked by Calgary Expo.
Oh, wow. Wow, it's turning into, Kentucky.
Might be unblocked now, who knows? They could be flip-flopped.
It's like, it's as if it is worse to be associated, because one of the things they complained about us, the first thing they said about us was that we were MRAs, men's rights activists. So apparently it is worse to argue that men are human, and human rights don't just apply to women and children, but they apply also to men. It's worse to say that than it is to depict Hitler and to depict Nazism and to celebrate it in any way, shape, or form. It's worse to say that men are human than it is to do that. And this is what it really brought home to me, thinking about that just now. It really brought home to me. There's actually a line in one of Allison's comics in the middle of a discussion where one of her alien characters asks one of the human characters in a discussion about sex if men are always considered strangers, and I think that she really nailed it. Our society treats men like strangers. All men are strangers. All men are pushed away, and all men are considered something else other than human. That's the root of the problem. And it's the thing that needs to change.
And the rhetoric in the convention made it such that that kind of disconnect, that kind of level of distrust is maintained
Yeah.
in the name of equality. And during the panel, I mean, we've heard people talk about Allison disrupting the panel, and again, that's just such garbage. I remember somebody asking me not too long ago, like, well, what if somebody held a Star Wars panel? And they wanted to do and somebody stood up and said, let's talk about Star Trek. But that's total
Can I answer that? I can actually answer
well,
that.
let me finish my thought. But it's a total Coke and Pepsi situation. It's forcing a context where you have men's rights activism and feminism set as these completely disjoint ideas where you can't have a discussion at all, and you're basically interrupting a lecture that was set in stone to begin with. This was a situation where the moderator welcomed Allison to the floor when Allison asked to have
And there's
the
another
floor.
thing about that. A panel is not just a discussion in your living room. It is an educational environment. It is intended to make an authoritative statement. So here we have a con-sponsored,
Specifically from the panel perspective.
From the perspective of the viewers. If you go to a panel to hear, to learn, from experts. So here we have a endorsed, which really makes it an area endorsed, since it is supported with public money, statement that was made about MRAs. And feminists, by responding to that harassment, are saying, we have the right to talk about you, we have the right to slander you, we have the right to stereotype you, and you do not have the right to correct the record. We are allowed to decide what you are, and you don't get to talk back to us.
That is typical.
Now,
That's typical of feminist
The
argumentation.
biggest complaint I have seen in men's rights forums from feminists is that we criticize feminism too much.
Yeah.
They feel exempt from criticism. They don't feel like other people are allowed to talk about them at all.
Yeah.
And yet they feel that they are allowed to slander another political group, and we're not allowed to answer back.
And on that, I mean, this has all been great. I wish I could let you guys keep on going, but I gotta get out of here. So thank you. Thanks for giving your thoughts, everybody.
You all right?
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
I didn't
absolutely.
say
You can say
anything.
anything you want.
No, it's okay.
Not a word.
You guys basically, we're
No,
all.
you're censored. You can't talk.
Oh, I see. I'm
No.
sorry.
Did you have something?
Censor the Puerto Rican, I get it.
Did you have something to
It's
say?
fine, I do.
Okay.
I just want to say that I've been watching all the support that we've been getting from the people who saw this. I think that on the positive side, we have gotten a lot more exposure than we would have had they had just left us alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they would have just left us alone in the booth and didn't try to remove or get us removed and didn't cause this whole stir, then the only thing that likely would have happened is we would have sold some merchandise. We would have had a few conversations, and we would have met with our fans.
Yeah.
And now we have more fans. I think we've added almost 1,000 subscribers to the Honey Badger channel just since this event has happened.
Yeah.
And we've been getting overwhelming support on Twitter and on Facebook and other places. And I think that's fantastic. And it just goes to show, the harder you try to censor someone, then the more you expose the message, because people become curious and they investigate and they want to look at it.
Speaking of which, there's going to be a link to Xenospora comic, the Allison team is comic in the low bar.
Yes.
On that.
And then I guess the last thing I would say is I've noticed that there's a new thing going around where they're asking to bring Allison back. And there's a lot of videos and pictures and Twitter things about it. And I would say that, if it only took 25 complaints to tear her down, how many is it going to take to put her back in place?
Exactly.
I may have one more thought if it's quick.
Very quick.
Okay. Allison stayed within the relevance of women in comics. She is a woman in comics. She's a great artist, she's a great author, and she has offered something positive to the community. And people who are watching know what equality looks like through the sentiments. So those of you who support Allison are going to be setting an example that they're better at supporting equality than feminists and social justice warriors are. So if you want to